I remember the sound first. A low, metallic groan, like a creature waking from centuries of sleep. The door behind me, that door, was already breathing before I even touched it. I don't know why I went there alone. Maybe because I'd been dreaming of it for weeks, an endless corridor with no ceiling, walls dripping with whispers that knew my name. Every morning, I'd wake up with a taste of rust on my tongue and the echo of a single phrase. When the door closes, it will never open again. It wasn't a warning. It was an invitation. So that night, I went. The mansion on the edge of town had long been swallowed by ivy and rumor. No one claimed to own it anymore, but the air around it still bowed, as though the house remembered authority. I stepped inside with a lantern that flickered more than it burned, my heartbeat louder than the wind scratching through the eaves. The door waited at the end of a narrow hall, taller than it had any right to be, carved with faces that seemed to move when I blinked. I felt it watching me, even though it didn't have eyes. Then came that voice again, softer this time, somewhere between a whisper and a sigh. Once you go through, you will not return the same. I swallowed hard, fingers trembling against the iron handle. The metal was cold enough to bite. And still, I turned it. The door groaned once more, deep and slow, as if protesting. I stepped through, and before I could even look back, it slammed shut behind me. A silence fell so thick it felt like being buried alive. And that's when I knew. The voice hadn't lied. The door behind me would never open again. For a long moment, I couldn't move. The air on the other side of the door felt heavier, thicker, as though every breath I took was borrowed. My lantern flickered once, twice, and steadied, casting a weak circle of light around me. The floor beneath my boots was made of black marble, smooth as glass, yet when I stepped forward, it rippled, like water trying very hard to pretend it was stone. That was when I realized I could hear something else, soft and rhythmic. Breathing. But not mine. The walls were moving. Each panel pulsed inward and outward, slow and steady, as though the entire corridor were alive. I reached out, foolishly curious, and laid my fingertips against the surface. It was warm, and it exhaled. I stumbled back, heart pounding. My mind screamed to turn around, to find another exit, but the door, my only door, had vanished. Not just closed. Gone. There was nothing behind me but unbroken stone. Then the whisper returned, closer this time, sliding through the air like smoke. Keep walking. It's waiting. What's waiting? I whispered back before I could stop myself. The lantern guttered again, the flame shrinking to a trembling spark. From far ahead, in the direction of the corridor's vanishing point, a faint glow answered. Not steady, but pulsing, the same rhythm as the walls. I should have turned back. I should have screamed, prayed, done something. Instead, I stepped toward the light. And as I did, the breathing around me changed. No longer steady, no longer calm. The house had noticed me. The light ahead grew brighter as I walked, not with warmth, but with that pale, sickly shimmer of moonlight on water. Every step echoed longer than it should have, as if the sound itself didn't want to leave. Soon, the corridor opened into a grand gallery lined with enormous portraits. They stretched from floor to ceiling, faces of people I didn't recognize, all rendered in oil so old the paint cracked like dried blood. But the eyes moved. When I turned my head, they followed. When I stopped walking, they blinked, slowly, deliberately, as if testing how human they could pretend to be. I tried not to look at them, but the silence pressed harder the more I ignored it. My boots made no sound now. The breathing had stopped. Everything waited. Then a voice, not a whisper this time, but a murmur right behind my ear, spoke. Find yourself. I spun around, the lantern swinging wildly, its light flaring across a dozen faces. And there on the farthest wall was me, my own portrait, freshly painted. My eyes wide and terrified, my mouth slightly open as if caught mid-breath. But it wasn't still. The painted version of me was moving. It tilted its head the way I had, leaned forward just a fraction, and smiled. Not my smile. Not even close. I stumbled backward, slamming into another frame. The portrait I hit, a woman in a veil, turned her head toward me, the paint cracking with emotion. Then, one by one, every figure in the gallery began to shift. Eyes darting, lips twitching, shoulders rising and falling with phantom breath. And through the noise of creaking canvas and snapping paint came a single, distant sound. Footsteps. Someone, or something, was walking toward me from the other end of the gallery. The footsteps echoed slow and deliberate, each one landing heavier than the last. Whoever, or whatever, was coming didn't hurry. It wanted me to hear it. I backed away, clutching the lantern close. The painted eyes around me gleamed with reflected flame, hundreds of silent witnesses. My portrait still smiled from its frame, lips curving wider now, as if pleased. The footsteps stopped. A pause. A breath. Then one sharp click. The frame beside mine, the one holding an old man with hollow eyes, shuddered. His painted hand reached out, fingers cracking through the canvas like brittle twigs. Another click, and a woman stepped halfway through her own portrait, gown dragging flakes of dried paint onto the marble floor. They were leaving their frames. My lantern dimmed to a dying ember. I ran, my boots slipping on marble that rippled again beneath me. The corridor ahead seemed to stretch longer the faster I moved, a nightmare loop folding in on itself. Behind me came the scraping sound of shoes, brushes, and canvas, dozens of them following. I turned a corner, desperate for an exit, and nearly crashed into a new door. A tall, narrow thing made of glass and framed with gold leaf. It pulsed faintly, the same rhythm as before, the rhythm of breathing walls and living paint. Behind the glass, I saw another hallway. But something was off. Everything inside the reflection looked perfect. Clean, bright, still. And standing there, facing me through the glass, was myself. But she wasn't holding a lantern. She was smiling. And then, she raised her hand and knocked. 3 times, the knocks echoed, not against glass, but inside my skull. Each one heavier, closer, until I thought my bones might splinter from the sound. The figure on the other side of the door, my mirror self, tilted her head, still smiling that too wide, too calm grin. Her eyes shimmered like mercury, the reflection rippling around her like heat on stone. I whispered, "Who are you?" though the answer felt obvious. She mouthed something back. No sound, just the motion of lips. "Let me in." I shook my head. She frowned, not in anger, but in pity, like a parent disappointed in a child who hasn't learned a lesson. The portraits behind me creaked again. I could feel them getting closer, their weight bending the air, their breaths overlapping like a storm. I turned back to the glass door, my only way out. My reflection reached out first, palm against the inside of the glass. Without thinking, I mirrored her. The moment our hands aligned, the surface turned liquid. Cold shot through me, straight to my heart. The world inverted. Suddenly, I was inside the reflection, standing in that bright, pristine corridor I'd seen from the other side. The glass had gone still again, but now my other self, the one who had been inside, stood where I had been. She wasn't smiling anymore. She looked furious. She slammed her fists against the glass. I staggered back. On my side, the hallway remained silent, untouched. On hers, she screamed, a sound I couldn't hear but could feel vibrating in my ribs. Then slowly, she raised her lantern. Only, it wasn't a lantern. It was my heart, glowing faintly red, beating in her hand. I stumbled backward, clutching my chest, expecting blood, pain, something, but there was nothing. My heart still beat, faint and distant, like it was buried somewhere far away. Beyond the glass, my reflection stood calm again, holding the pulsing light to her chest as though it belonged there. Maybe it did now. The thought made bile rise in my throat. The corridor behind me hummed faintly, vibrating like a tuning fork. No portraits here, no breathing walls, only white marble that shimmered faintly, as though lit from within. Every few steps, faint ripples spread through the floor, each one timed perfectly to the beat I could feel inside my skull. Thump, thump, thump. I turned, searching for an exit. The air smelled faintly of ozone and rain-soaked stone. Somewhere ahead, the hum changed pitch, subtle but deliberate. Someone was singing. It was a child's voice, soft, lilting, almost sweet. The melody twisted in odd intervals, just a little too high or too low, as if it didn't understand what a song should sound like. When the door shuts, the world forgets. When the mirror cracks, the heart resets. The tune echoed endlessly down the corridor. I followed, though every instinct screamed not to. My reflection was still pounding at the glass behind me, her face distorting with rage, but I couldn't look back. The corridor ended in another door, smaller, older, made of the same warped wood as the first one I'd entered through. It had no handle, no lock, only a keyhole shaped like an eye. And as I leaned closer, something blinked inside it. Not a trick of light. Not my imagination. An actual eye watching me from the other side, that I froze. The eye didn't blink again. It just stared, unblinking and glossy, its pupil expanding and contracting as though tasting the light. I whispered, "Who's there?" No answer. Only the faint sound of breathing, steady, human, but coming from inside the door itself. I crouched, trying to peer closer, and felt a cold draft slip through the keyhole, brushing my cheek like a sigh. Then the breathing stopped. For a single heartbeat, everything went silent. Then tap. Something poked the keyhole from the other side. I stumbled back just as a thin black tendril, like smoke solidified, began to curl out from the keyhole, stretching and splitting into 2, then 5. They moved with deliberate slowness, like fingers tasting the air. I should have run. I wanted to, but my feet rooted to the spot, heavy as lead. The tendrils brushed the marble floor, then the wall, leaving faint burn marks wherever they touched. Then I heard a voice, faint, distorted, as if coming through a long, dark tunnel. "You shouldn't be here, but since you are..." The tendrils withdrew, and the eye behind the keyhole blinked once, long and slow. "You might as well see what waits." The wood of the door rippled, softening into something alive. The frame stretched, widening on its own, forming a rough archway. Beyond it, I saw a staircase spiraling downward, lit by thousands of tiny candles that hovered in midair. Each flame pulsed in rhythm with my heartbeat. And far below, at the base of the stairs, I could just make out a figure, small, childlike, standing perfectly still. The same voice, now clearer, sang again. "When you reach the bottom, you'll know your name." And I realized with a sick twist, I couldn't remember what my name was anymore. The first step groaned beneath me, an ancient, heavy sound like the house itself exhaled my trespass. Each candle flame quivered as I moved, as though whispering to the next, "She's coming." The staircase wound downward in a perfect spiral, but every step felt steeper than the last. I began counting them aloud. 1, 2, 3, because silence had teeth, and I didn't trust what waited in it. By the time I reached 30, my voice sounded strange. Echoes returned from below, but they didn't match. When I said 31, the echo said 32. When I said 33, it whispered 34. It was ahead of me. The light shifted too. Each candle I passed dimmed, as though my presence drained it. The ones below still flickered bright, thousands of tiny eyes waiting for my descent. Halfway down, I noticed something else. My shadow wasn't following me. It was lingering on the wall 2 steps above, paused mid-step, watching me go. I could see it clearly, head tilted slightly, hands trembling at its sides. "Come on," I muttered, voice cracking. "Don't stay behind." It didn't move. When I turned back to keep descending, the child I'd seen before was no longer standing still. It was sitting now, legs dangling off the last stair, humming the same off-key melody I'd heard earlier. When the door shuts, the world forgets. The final candle winked out as I neared the bottom. The child's face lifted toward me, pale, luminous, eyes wide as the keyholes. Only it wasn't a child. It was me, a smaller, younger version, hair tangled, cheeks hollow, smiling faintly like someone who'd been waiting far too long. She tilted her head and whispered, "You took your time." I stood frozen at the base of the staircase, my breath ragged and loud against the hush of the underground air. The younger version of me, barefoot, wearing a tattered dress the color of old paper, looked up with the patience of a saint or a predator. "Who are you?" I whispered, though part of me already knew. She smiled, an innocent, eerie thing. "I'm who you were before you forgot." Her voice wasn't quite right. Each word arrived half a second too late, like it had traveled through water to reach me. "Before I forgot what?" I asked. She stood and began walking toward me, her feet leaving faint, dark footprints that shimmered for a moment before vanishing. "Before you opened the first door. Before you started listening." Her eyes were unsettlingly bright, catching candlelight that no longer burned. "You wanted to know what was on the other side. But you never asked what you'd leave behind." A tremor ran through the marble beneath us. I could hear someone moving above on the staircase I just descended. Dozens of steps creaked all at once. The girl, my younger self, glanced upward unbothered. "They're following you," she said softly. "They always do." I turned toward the noise, lantern raised, though it barely gave any light now. Figures began to emerge from the spiral, gray, faceless, dragging themselves down as if gravity had forgotten its rules. Their forms shifted, blurred, each one the outline of a person I almost recognized. Old friends, strangers, and among them, one face I knew too well. My reflection, the one from the glass door. She was descending too, still holding that glowing heart in her hand, its pulse flickering brighter with every step. The younger me leaned close to my ear and whispered, "You're almost home." Then she vanished, no sound, no smoke, just gone, leaving behind the faint scent of rain and rust. The staircase fell silent again. Only one pair of footsteps continued downward. Mine. The air down here was heavier, like breathing through soaked velvet. Each candle guttered out as my reflection descended, one by one, until the last flame clung to its wick with desperate defiance. She reached the bottom step and stood across from me, lantern heart glowing in her hand. The light it cast wasn't red anymore. It had turned a deep, molten gold, throbbing with rhythm so strong I could feel it through the floor. For a moment, we just stared at each other. Two versions of the same soul, both trembling, both uninvited. Then she smiled, the same way I had smiled in that cursed portrait, calm, knowing wrong. "You dropped this," she said. Her voice wasn't an echo now. It came from everywhere, the walls, the air, the skin of my own hands. "I didn't drop it," I said, though I wasn't sure. "You took it." She tilted her head. "You gave it. When you opened the door." My stomach turned. "I didn't open it for you. But you did." She stepped closer, holding out the golden light between us. "You wanted to forget the weight, the ache, the sound of what you lost. I took it so you could walk away." I could see my pulse flickering inside that light, hear my own heartbeat speaking back to me. And underneath it, a voice whispered in rhythm with a thump, over and over, "Remember, remember, remember." My knees nearly buckled. What am I supposed to remember? She leaned close enough that our breaths mingled, and the glow between us illuminated her face completely. It wasn't my reflection anymore. It was the face of every version of me I had ever abandoned. The child, the dreamer, the coward, the seeker, all of them staring out from one shifting mask. And they all spoke together, a single sentence that rattled through the air like thunder. "Remember what waits when the door opens the last time." Then she pressed the golden heart against my chest. And the world shattered. Everything broke. Sound, air, even thought, splintering into light. For a heartbeat, I hung in nothingness, weightless, breathless, certain that I'd finally fallen out of the world. Then I landed, not with pain, but with a quiet thud, as though I'd been placed carefully somewhere new. I opened my eyes. I was back in the mansion. But it wasn't decayed anymore. The ivy was gone. The walls gleamed like fresh bone. The air shimmered with faint dust motes that moved as if obeying a secret rhythm. The door, the first door, the one that would never open again, stood behind me, intact, pristine. I could hear the faint pulse of that golden heart still echoing inside me. Not a thump now, more like a clock. Tick, tick, tick. I followed the sound down a long corridor that shouldn't have existed. The portraits were empty this time, frames without faces, blank canvases that still breathed faintly when I passed. The marble rippled underfoot like water, remembering how to be solid. At the end of the hall, I found a room I'd never seen before. Inside stood a long table, covered with clocks. Dozens, maybe hundreds of them, each ticking out of sync. On the far side of the table sat a figure in a chair, head bowed, motionless. "Hello," I called, voice soft. The figure raised its head. It was me again, older this time. Hair streaked with silver, eyes hollow, smile faint and tired. "You've been a long time coming," she said. "Do you remember why you came here?" I opened my mouth to answer, but no words came out. None fit. The older me nodded, unsurprised. "You don't have to. The house remembers for you." Then every clock on the table stopped ticking at once. Silence. The older me reached into her pocket and pulled out a small silver key shaped like an eye. "Time to see," she said. And she slid the key across the table toward me. The key glimmered faintly on the table, its metal pulsing like it had veins. The tiny iris carved at its center rotated, slowly, deliberately, watching me as if impatient. I didn't want to touch it. Every instinct screamed that this was the point of no return, the true door I'd been walking toward all along. But the older version of me just smiled. "It's already yours," she said softly. "It always has been." Her voice carried the weight of memory I couldn't yet reach. My hand trembled as I picked the key up. It was warm, alive, and when my skin met the metal, my vision blurred. The room flickered. The walls melted away, replaced by blackness that stretched in every direction. Only the table remained, floating in the dark. The clocks began to tick again, one by one, but backward. Tick-tock. Tock-tick. Time unraveling. The older me stood, her shadow stretching impossibly long. "Do you see them?" she whispered. And I did. In the darkness beyond the table, faint shapes emerged, figures made of dim light, suspended like stars. Each one was me. Different ages, different versions, laughing, crying, screaming, reaching. Every choice I'd ever made had built one of them. The air vibrated with the echo of their voices, layered and endless. Choose again. Don't open it. Do. Remember. Forget. The key in my hand twisted on its own. The iris blinked. I looked back at the older me, but her chair was empty now, still rocking gently, as though she'd just stood up and walked out of the world. The darkness parted ahead, revealing a new door. It looked ordinary this time, plain wood, no carvings, no faces. But there was a single message burned across its center. The final room. And just above the keyhole, the faint outline of an eye waited. It blinked once. Slowly. Waiting for the key trembled between my fingers, like a heartbeat trapped in metal. The eye on its shaft rolled upward, aligning perfectly with the keyhole's blinking pupil. For one awful moment, I thought both were staring directly into me, reading the things I'd buried. Then, before I could talk myself out of it, I turned the key. The click that followed wasn't a sound. It was a feeling, a sharp snap inside my chest. The door sighed open, releasing a gust of air that smelled faintly of rain, dust, and something older, something that remembered being alive. I stepped through. The room beyond was empty. No clocks. No portraits. Just darkness, soft and absolute. At first, I thought it was truly void. Then I saw faint shapes, shadows rippling like reflections on water. As my eyes adjusted, I realized what I was looking at. A vast lake, black as ink, still as glass. The golden glow in my chest pulsed once, and the lake responded with a ripple. My reflection appeared on its surface. Only this time, she didn't mimic me. She stood on the other side, smiling faintly, as though she'd been waiting forever. I knelt by the edge, trying to see past her. But there was no bottom, no end, just more darkness, infinite and patient. Then she spoke. Her voice was mine, older, steadier. This is where all doors lead. Every choice. Every version of you that tried to remember or to forget. I swallowed. And what happens if I go in? She tilted her head. Then you stop standing between. The golden light flared again, spreading through my veins. The pulse grew faster, louder, each beat vibrating through the air until the lake itself began to hum. My reflection extended her hand from the water. You opened every door but this one, she whispered. Step through, and you'll finally know. The surface shimmered like molten glass, waiting. Behind me, the key dissolved into dust. The door sealed itself shut. There was no going back. The humming deepened until I could feel it inside my teeth, a low vibration that made the air shimmer. The lake's surface brightened from black to mirror silver. I didn't step forward. The ground pulled me in. Cold. That's the first thing I felt. Not the chill of water, but of memory. The cold of every moment I'd tried to forget. My body sank without resistance, the silver surface closing above my head like liquid glass. Underneath, there was no up or down, only drifting shapes. Faces. Hundreds of them. Some were mine. Others were strangers who somehow wore my eyes. They floated past, whispering fragments of sentences I almost recognized. You said you'd never look back. You promised me you'd stay asleep. We opened it together once before. Each voice came from a different mouth, but all of them were me. The deeper I sank, the warmer it became. The water began to glow, swirling gold and violet. I reached out to one of the faces, a younger version of me, maybe 8 or 9, with a daisy tucked behind her ear. She smiled sadly, lifted a hand, and pressed her palm to mine. The moment our fingers touched, a rush of images hit me. The door, the corridor, the portraits, the stairs, the key, the heart. All looping, repeating, reshuffling like a deck of moments I'd lived 1,000 times before. Then a voice, vast and unplaceable, spoke, not from around me, but through me. You are the house. The water roared. The faces began to dissolve, each turning to light. My body broke apart into threads of gold, scattering like dust in the current. I wasn't drowning. I was opening. And through the light, I saw it. Another door, far below, smaller than the rest, glowing white at the edges as though it couldn't contain what lay inside. The final door. It pulsed once, then began to open by itself. The white door at the bottom of the lake drifted open like a slow breath, releasing a current of light that swallowed everything. Faces, water, even thought. I expected fire, pain, revelation. But there was only stillness. And then I was standing. No more water. No mansion. Just an endless plain of silver mist under a sky that pulsed in rhythm with my heartbeat. A figure waited ahead, neither young nor old, male nor female. A silhouette made of light and shadow. Familiar in a way that made my lungs ache. I took a step toward it, and the mist parted to reveal the outlines of every door I had opened. The same sequence again and again, stretching into infinity. Each one shut tight now, silent. The figure spoke with my voice, but steadier, deeper, filled with calm. You've been walking in circles, trying to remember which side of the door you're on. I tried to speak, but no sound came. You built the mansion to hold your choices, it continued. Every room is a memory you locked away. Every heartbeat a key. It raised a hand, palm up. Resting there was the golden light, the heart, the lantern, the echo of everything I had been chasing. You opened all the doors because you thought truth lived behind them. But truth doesn't wait behind. It becomes you when you stop turning the handle. I hesitated. So, this is the end? The figure smiled, kind and terrible. It's the beginning. Again. It pressed the light into my hands. I felt warmth spread through me, soft and endless. The doors around us shimmered, began to dissolve into the mist until there was only one left. The first one. The one that had closed behind me so long ago. This time, it stood wide open. A breath of fresh wind spilled through it, carrying the scent of rain and dawn. I stepped toward it, my reflection walking beside me now, neither leading nor following. Together, we crossed the threshold. And as the door closed behind us, quietly, without malice, I finally understood what the whisper had meant all along. When the door shuts, it will never open again. Because it didn't have to. I was already home,